It was 20 years ago today that the lights went out, the great blackout. Betsy was talking about this in our meeting today. It started here in Cleveland and spread across the East Coast.
One of those things you knew exactly where you were when it happened, and many of us remember it, of course, because it started right here in Northeast Ohio. One of the people who remembers it best, our very own Lydia Esparra.
It was around 4 o'clock and folks were at the feast in Little Italy when Cleveland went dark. Frank Macek, a director at 3 News, remembers it well.
And we started noticing up on the monitors behind us that CNN and MSNBC and all the cable networks were reporting that New York was without power.
Shortly after, we would soon learn much of the East Coast was hit too. Our Russ Mitchell was in New York City.
I was sitting in my office. I remember the lights flickered for a second, and apparently the backup generator came on.
The blackout on a hot summer day, just like 9/11.
That was just a couple years after 9/11, so we were wondering right off the bat, was it another terrorist attack or had something else happened?
Thousands, if not millions of people were walking the streets of New York.
I can remember that the hot dog vendors who normally got $1.50 for a hot dog were selling them for $10.
With no power, how were you going to store food?
And I can remember walking home and New York City being pitch black, which I had never seen before, which you don't see in New York City. But the bars, people were spilling out of them because I think they were not only celebrating the fact that this was not a terrorist attack, but also saying, hey, we got to make the best of this.
It was the same in Cleveland, no traffic lights and just darkness. Of course, the outages went all across the East Coast, and as they were trying to figure out where it began, they pinpointed it here to Eastlake, where some trees were tangled with some power lines. And the outages also in Toledo, Detroit, all the way into Canada. 50 million people without power, and no one could ever have believed it started here.
It was like, how could something happen there in Cleveland, Ohio, outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and affect New York City and all across the East Coast? It was fascinating. It still is fascinating.
A fascinating event that lasted in some places 4 days.
Most of our technology at that time, cell phones and things didn't work. We were working on two-way radios at that time. We were broadcasting no one really for a couple of days. I mean, nobody had power, so nobody was watching television.
Oh, yes, and it was a hot one that day, too. Those 4 days were very hot. Now, there have been other outages dating back to 1965, but none of them affected as many people as the one in 2003. So it's worth mentioning again, 50 million people, Russ, without power. And you and I were talking, and Betsy, too. I mean, remember we used to have Blackberries. None of that was working.
Nothing.
Nothing. You know what was working was the hardline phones that you still had at your house. Yeah. So it was crazy. It was just a crazy but interesting day.
And yes, kids, we did have cell phones back in 2000.
We did.
We really did.
They weren't smartphones, that's all, but we had them.
True.
I just remember we braced for the worst, and all we saw was the best in people. There were so many people who actually had to clean out their refrigerators, so they just started to have cookouts on the street. Everybody got to see their neighbors once again.
Yeah, it was. It was. You did. Russ and I talked about that too, that he saw the best of the people in New York, and of course, Cleveland always rises to the occasion.
Yeah, all right. Lydia Esparra, thanks a lot.